Okay, everyone, welcome to another of our webinar series for product leaders. This one's how far is your company from AI? And so we'll go through and we'll help you understand the key things to look for when it comes to your company's AI readiness. I'm the founder and CEO of Arcanum. I set up the company nearly 6 years ago, and we've got a team in Wellington and Christchurch, and we've worked on over 50 projects with machine learning. And so this webinar series and the others are kind of an accumulation of what we've learnt, and hopefully to give you some advice on why and how you should consider machine learning. We've worked across the not-for-profit sector, financial services, telco, insurance, and we work very closely with AWS and our other partners were Cato and OutSystems as well. So in terms of what we do, to give you some context, we have a platform and a team which help people start on the machine learning journey for a number of different use cases, as you can see. But we deliver the APIs and all of the infrastructure, all of the machine learning into your IT environment. So then you can integrate it into your internal systems or your web applications, your mobile applications, to add machine learning and AI functions and features. And so that's why we're doing this product focused webinar series to help people see what's possible for their own products and how they can make their user experiences better. So how far is your company from AI? And that's the topic. We're going to go through a number of different areas, both from a business perspective and then also from a technology perspective, giving you some guidance on how to assess how far away your company is from being able to get value from AI. So first of all, there's the question as to why. Why are you considering AI? Why might your company be considering AI? And really the question is, because if you don't know why you would do it, then the various paths that you may take could lead you in the right direction, or it could lead you in the wrong direction, or it might just be the wrong path for your organization. And so that's why we're really here to help on that journey. And this webinar is going to give you a bit of direction. So first of all is why? Why are you considering it? If you can pop into the chat between 1 to 5. So are you considering AI because you feel you need to catch up compared to other competitors? You need to get ahead. You need to stay ahead. Maybe you're not sure why yet. Or maybe you've got some other reasons. You can just pop that into the chat. We're collecting this data over the webinars. So that's really useful. Thank you. So the point that we really want to make and emphasize and really re-emphasize is the fact that it is a journey. We're here to kind of help on that journey. And it's really about understanding what the starting points are, what the foundational work that you need to put into place, both from a technology, people, and an organization, and how do you get to something running sustainably where you're continually getting value out of the technology for your organization. So before that, to answer the question, why should you consider AI as part of your company's future? For us, we see, as many others do, that AI is an inevitable piece of technology that people are going to need to have in their toolkit. It's a question of when everybody needs to have it rather than if they need to have it. We see a future where AI is going to drive company performance across all key functions. And as the commentators say, it's going to be considered part of competitive advantage. So it is going to be that kind of foundational technology, but that's into the future. And so we're kind of working back from that to say, how do you start? And the challenge for smaller companies on how to start is the crossing the chasm problem. For those that haven't read the book, it's about technology adoption. And so a lot of time and effort's put into the innovators and the early adopters. People build these really comprehensive tools, a lot of tech investment, because those early companies believe they can get an unfair advantage by investing early in those technologies. They've made those commitments. They've got the strategy to do that. The others, the early majority onwards, are following the lead of the early adopters. But you've got to cross this digital chasm, because what was built for the early adopters is going to be very different to what the rest of the market actually needs. And so that's really part of the challenge of going on the journey. You may know that you need to get to AI at some point, but getting there is really, the first challenge. And so when you kind of think about the market leaders, they've all kind of embraced this exponential kind of technology strategy. They are getting disproportionately larger returns compared to their peers because they're leveraging technology. We can think about Instagram and Netflix and Zero, and then more kind of niche ones like Quirky. They have replaced the legacy organizations, and they've replaced them because they're using technology, they're becoming platforms, they're embracing AI, and now, many people will struggle to remember Kodak and Blockbuster, because these new technology companies have taken over. Oh, go back a slide. So when we begin to look at what are the attributes for these exponential organizations, there's a whole bunch, and each of them have their merits, but for different size organizations and for different types of organizations, and there's really a fewer number of ways that either you can tap into the abundance or manage the abundance. And we'll just go into a couple of those that are relevant to machine learning. So obviously, getting a bit of an explanation as to what we mean by AI. It is the self-learning software that recognizes patterns at scale, and it can do that faster than humans can. And you can generate insights for internal operations and for products, and thanks to those algorithms. The other big part to it is experiments. So we absolutely believe that on the journey to getting value from AI, your organization needs to be ready to run experiments. No business plan survives its first contact with customers, as Steve Blank says. And so being able to go into something with a mindset of learning is really, really important, and especially when it comes to machine learning, because it is a journey to get to those answers. And as Jim Barkdale, the CEO of FedEx, says, if you've got data, let's use the data. But if you don't have any data, then I'm going to make the decisions. And so really, again, being able to get to data from experiments to understand why your company should do something with AI is really, really important. And there are opportunities to do experiments and collect data all over a company. Understanding the key activities and the key partners, how do you identify data there that could point towards value from machine learning? There's a lot of activity in the customers and customer relationships area. We kind of know, chatbots and the like have been pretty popular for the last few years. But then if you look at some of the internal drivers, especially with this economic environment, how do you make more money? How do you save more money? How do you do experiments in there to collect data that machine learning might be able to use? But as I said, it's having an organization, a company, which is ready to embrace experiments rather than trying to be too predeterministic and saying, this is where we want to solve problems with machine learning. It's how do you begin to drive experiments that will give you some indication that you should apply machine learning. Oh, well, my slide stopped. Oh, because I've got lots of question marks. That's why. The next kind of question is, what is the appropriate level of AI for your company? So we talked about the big global leaders. They are already AI first. So Google, Microsoft, Meta, Spotify, Netflix, all of those companies are already AI first organizations. And that's obviously not going to be appropriate for the vast majority of other companies. So understanding what the level of organizational commitment should be is, again, something that you need to understand. When we look at it, there's a number of different layers to this. And so this is what it would mean to be AI first. And so understanding the degree of commitment is important when you think about AI for your own organization. So you need to build the teams that build the AI. That's what AI first companies do. Companies that are not AI first will work with outside vendors. They will consume software. They will consume products. They don't need to build out their own teams. You need to integrate the AI with existing processes whereas other organizations may plug it into the side of workflows to enhance existing processes. So again, what level of commitment, what level of change? How do you measure and communicate the effectiveness of AI? We would say is really important, no matter what your size of company or how you're looking to integrate it. But again, the other point is to reinvest in the ongoing competitive advantage, so you get those compounded benefits. But again, that takes commitment from the very highest level, down to the lowest level, and that's something which organizations need to be ready to think about when it comes to their strategy. And so, how does that look in an organization? So we've talked about the AI first, the ML native kind of organizations. We know how their products look and feel, how personalized they are, how smart they are, how intelligent they are, how much data they gather, which is obviously the other side to that technology usage. But if we look at the next tier down into companies and products where machine learning is integrated, then it begins to become something which we can understand and is accessible for all organizations. So being able to plug in, for example, Zero, where you're predicting the cost codes for invoices, or Amazon, where it's making recommendations and other things to buy, or Power BI, where it's making predictive analytics rather than just reporting on the past. So again, they're not AI first, but they are beginning to integrate AI and machine learning. And then the next tier down is where it's really just a function or a feature. Halter, the farm management, animal management hardware company, they use machine learning in order to provide recommendations to the farmers on what to do, with the herds. Or Apportio, which is an email processing company. Again, they have end-to-end email functionality, and they use machine learning for directing and classifying the emails in different ways. So again, your organization will need to strategize around what level of machine learning integration makes sense. So then looking for that journey towards transformational level adoption of AI, which could be a 5 or 10 year journey for some organizations. Obviously, this is the Gartner data maturity process or journey with a lens of AI that we've adopted and adapted. So most people that we see, that we begin to interact with, are at that level 2, where they've done some thinking around artificial intelligence, they've run some kind of data science experiments, they may have run a successful proof of concept, and then they're looking at how do you move on to that next level where you've got more commitment, you're building out a team, you've got measurable value, you've got the data pipelines and the enterprise data layers kind of in place, and you're really looking to multiply the use cases. And then on the journey to how does it move into being fully integrated into the organization where it is pervasive and disruptive. However, most of the organizations that we talk to in these webinars are actually at level 1 or maybe even before that, where it's just the beginning of the journey, the beginning of the thinking about the journey. And so that's, again, why we put on these educational webinars, to help people understand where they are on that journey and what would be next. So when it comes to that pivotal step of moving from a experiment into a function, we see a lot of these common patterns, and we'll just go through what we see and how we think about them in terms of how important they are. So the first stage is really understanding what resources you have. So typically we see organizations have at least one data scientist, because having an understanding of what that function means is important. There are some tech resources available, which could be software engineers, it could be DevOps, or it could be just some allocation of resources from another team that looks after IT. There is an understanding of what algorithms and models are, and there's been some experimentation with machine learning, probably in the cloud, using one of the big tech companies. The next phase then is having a data champion, so somebody who wants to own the outcomes of the machine learning experiments. Without that kind of high-level sponsorship, it becomes really hard to engage the rest of the organization. They are prioritizing proof of concepts that kind of connect to larger initiatives within the organization. And then there is a budget to commit to doing work on a cloud ML server. So there may be some local ML server work, but now it's really getting into a commitment to putting some resources in place. And then the key thing is to find that hero use case, the one which is not too small but not too big, which I think also sounds like an Alice in the Wonderland kind of kind of phrase. And we're trying to find something which is small but meaningful. It will get the attention of stakeholders because it has an impact, but it doesn't distract too much. It isn't too expensive. It's going to take a lot of time, but it does have a clear path to building momentum. So if this is successful, then the next one will naturally carry on. And that's what's really key, is for these initiatives not to be done in isolation, that they're not just innovation projects, that they're part of a program which is gated, based on the success, based on the learnings, based on building momentum. And then really importantly, it does need to be connected to a strategic goal of the company. And so is it generating revenue? Is it improving customer service? Is it taking out costs, building efficiencies, or reducing risk? If it's not connected to one of those strategic goals, then again, trying to get the rest of the organization to care about it, becomes a lot harder. So again, when it comes to how far away is your company from AI, from an organizational perspective, it may not be very far, but there's a lot of things that need to be put in place to build consistency and build that momentum, which is really important. And then from there, after that hero use case is executed on, then it should lead on to a broader organizational investment, moving on to some kind of center of excellence where, again, dedicated expert resources are put in place, and then a timeline to deliver against those strategic goals. So this is the kind of journey that we typically see. And this is what typical success looks like when you talk about adopting machine learning. Then one of the big questions is, do we have enough time, or are we realistic about the timelines we're working with? And do we have the right kind of budget? And so, yes, it should be, whatever you do, it should be impact and return on investment driven. So the outcome needs to be measurable, and then you need to look at the cost and the time it will take to deliver that impact. And that should then be able to give you a prioritized list of use cases. But when you start looking at the internal versus external way to do these types of projects, then obviously there's going to be a battle and a tension strategically. Internal is often that DIY process. People think that's going to be quicker and cheaper, but quite often, if you don't have the right experts, it ends up taking longer and being more expensive. And then from a risk perspective, yes, you may you may be taking all of the lessons internally because you're doing it yourself, but then there's a higher risk of failure because you don't have the right expertise, or the expectations are either set too high or too low, and therefore you don't get the momentum that you want to build. Then obviously externally, working with experts is really key to be able to reduce the risk, get there faster, have that cost containment, but also making sure that you're working with a partner who wants to do knowledge transfer so you can continue to have that internal learning, which is often really, really key as an organization goes on this journey. And then it's, again, expectations of how do we do something small but meaningful? How do we turn that into a pilot program which we can iterate on, where we have growing commitments? How do we turn this into a larger program of work which has got organizational support, where we're really seeing improvements on the proof of concept and they're continuously adding value? And then how do you build that into a function which is then really being embraced by the whole organization and multiplying that impact? And then you get into the planning for the doing. One of the things that we find organizations are quite challenged with is building business cases to get machine learning initiatives off the ground. And so we work with organizations to do that, to understand what resources need to be aligned, how much that internal cost structure might be, what data do you have, where is it, how ready is it in terms of its size, scale, how clean is it, and so on and so forth. What should experiments look like? How can they be measured? How long should they take? What should the scope of those experiments be? And then finally, how are you going to execute on those? What kind of tech tooling is going to be needed for that to actually be turned into a reality? And so this all needs to be thought through, not just for in the context of the one proof of concept or the one experiment, but into the larger program of work, on the assumption that there is that internal commitment to do this in the first place. And so then there's going to be inevitable pain, because if it's something that the organization hasn't done before, then it has to be ready to go through some pain, or at least have mitigations for the pain, which we see on a regular basis. And those pain points cover kind of three different areas: process, tools, and talent. When it comes to the process, it really needs to be understood that machine learning is only a small part of a larger technology process, of a larger technology stack. And so what we often see, unfortunately, is things done in real isolation that never get integrated and embedded into the larger tech infrastructure, because there isn't an understanding of what it actually means to do machine learning in that broader context. And so doing machine learning actually involves a lot of other functions and features and the processes that go along with those, and quite often they're not fully understood. And then you've got to look at, okay, how does this fit with the tech stacks, with the processes, with the job descriptions, with the job roles, and so on. And so, DevOps is a pretty well developed function now. It's taken probably a decade to get to that point. Data ops is not a term which is quite there yet, but really there's a lot of work going on in data engineering, data pipelines, and data warehouse migration, so on and so forth. And then there's this new function which is evolving around model ops and ML ops for those organizations that are doing it at scale. What we typically see is at both ends of the spectrum, there's some maturity. So there's been a lot of time and effort put into data, and there's a lot of time and effort put into the DevOps and the integration layer for the end applications. But the bit in the middle, the harder, newer engineering piece and how that relates to cloud compute, that's a new field. And so understanding the processes, how to join them up, is another part of getting ready to be able to integrate and scale machine learning. And then there's the talent challenge. We are continuously trying to recruit experts in this field, machine learning engineers and machine learning operations. It's not easy because, again, it's a new job role. It's not something that you can very quickly get educated on and come out capable, because a lot of it is based on experience. And so that's another part of the challenge. If you're going down a pathway of considering machine learning, it's what is the recruitment process going to be? Where are you going to find the talent to support this? Or should you instead work with partners and vendors that have that talent already? So in summary, how far is your company from AI is really turned around to be, this is what needs to be true for you to start working on AI. You need to have some kind of business imperative for its adoption. We used to, a few years ago, hear a lot more, but we would hear from business leaders, we just need to do AI. And there wasn't really a reason behind it. It was just that people had heard about it somewhere, and it was one of those tick box kind of things. We've seen time and time again that doesn't end in real value. It's something which gets done for a little while and then gets put to the side. So having that business imperative, understanding what is possible, how it can meaningfully impact something, is really important. There needs to be an understanding of what the journey actually looks like to implement AI, that it isn't just a plug and play. It's not just real simple. There is some complexity behind it, but it's also not as hard as many of the big consulting and tech vendors would say, in terms of millions of dollars, multiple years, big teams. That's also not the case. So getting an understanding of the reality of the implementation journey for your organization is really important. Then there needs to be that hero use case, which is really going to make an impact, get people's attention, start that momentum. Then you need to be able to understand where you're going to get either the people from, or who to partner with to kind of go on that journey. How can they augment and integrate with your existing technical resources? So the processes are scalable rather than being done just in isolation. And then finally, of course, you need to have the right timelines and the right budgets to be able to start on the journey and you continue to invest to get the value out of the AI. So in terms of the next steps, we've got a number of different things. We have online readiness assessments that you can get access to through our website. And we are also doing data assessments. So we sign a confidentiality agreement. We kind of look at the data, look at the use cases to give you an early indication as to whether it's viable or not. And then we have more comprehensive discovery workshops that we run with one or more companies to really kind of go real deep into what would be required to do what you want to be able to do. So again, the platform's available. We've got a number of use cases out of the box. We've got machine learning models in the platform. You can start for free. You can deploy into your staging environment for free to really start playing around with things in your environment with your data. And so we're really keen, for people to do that and to give us some feedback as we go on our own journey. So again, thank you for joining. Thank you for everybody for being here. And if you want to connect with me, please feel free to do so on LinkedIn or Twitter, or drop me an email. But we encourage people to go check out our website, have a play with the platform, and start your journey to getting value from machine learning. So again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And let us know how we can help. Thanks.